I'm happy to be back in Haifa. I was a visiting professor here in 2017, and we had to postpone, because of COVID, we had to postpone this fellowship for 3 years. So I'm happy to be back and to teach at Haifa University, and I think that's a good continuation of the cooperation of our universities, the University of Haifa and the University of Potsdam, in that special relation around Ashkenazic studies. We are exchanging students and scholars from both our universities every year. And we hope to go on and to continue this cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all. In former Hebrew, one would open this session by addressing you with Rabotai Ugvarotai, and I'll start now to give my lecture in English. Disintegration, or German Jewry 2.0. Recent Jewish identity debates in Germany. In present public debates about the present and the future of German Jewry, two opposing positions are particularly striking. The positions of Dmitry Belkin and Max Czolek. As early as 2010, Dmitry Belkin, we see here, spoke in an exhibition catalogue for the Frankfurt exhibition Ausgerechnet Deutschland, Germany of all places, Jewish-Russian immigration to the Federal Republic of Germany, for the first time about German Jewry 2. What is meant by this is the following. The mass Jewish-Russian immigration to the Federal Republic of Germany after 1989 demographically created a new German Jewry. Belkin calls this German Jewry 2, knowing well that German Jewry 1 vanished in the Shoah. Belkin then deepened his reflection about German Jewry 2 in his 2016 autobiography, Germania. This is this book, and we need the new slide. Subtitled, How I Became Jewish and Adult in Germany. Belkin was born in Dnipro in the Ukraine in 1981, came to Germany in 1993 as a so-called Jewish quota refugee, Kontingentflüchtling, from the former Soviet Union. He studied and received his doctorate in Tübingen, worked as a curator at the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt am Main, then as a consultant at the Federal Jewish Scholarship Fund ELES, and today he heads the Shalom Aleikum project for the Jewish-Muslim dialogue fed by the Zentralrat der Juden, the Central Council of Jews in Germany. It was only in Germany, as the subtitle of his autobiography reveals, that he became Jewish and adult. Only as a post-migrant German citizen did he mature into a self-confident Jewish intellectual who reflected on being a Jew born in the Soviet Union but living in Germany today, writing in the German language and in front of the German public and readership. Belkin's thesis is, due to the immigration of around 224,000 Jews from the states of the former Soviet Union between 1989 and 2010, a new second German Jewry formed in Germany, which demographically as well as culturally replaced the first German Jewry that perished through emigration and or murder during the Nazi era. We need the new slide. In the decades after the Second World War, small Jewish community had formed again in the Federal Republic of Germany and in the German Democratic Republic, but their social, political and cultural influence was marginal in both German states. Between 1960, as you see here in the statistics of the Zentralrat, between 1960 and 1990, the number of Jewish community members in both German states stagnated at just under 30,000, while before 1933, around 500,000 Jews had lived in Germany. At the time of German reunification in 1990, Jews made up less than 0.5 per thousand of the total German population. So only the strong immigration of Jews from the states of the former Soviet Union from 1990 onwards catapulted the number of Jewish community members to almost 110,000 in the early 2000s. New Russian-speaking Jewish communities were established in small towns in provincial Germany, and synagogues opened where no Jews had lived since the Nazi era. The number of Jewish community members had more than tripled in a few years after 1990. But the number of Jews in Germany who do not belong to a Jewish community, such as almost all Israelis in Germany, but also 2/3 of the post-Soviet immigrants, the general number of Jews in Germany who do not belong to a Jewish community had also increased by this immigration. It tripled in one fell swoop. Today, including the approximately 20,000 Israelis, around 275,000 Jews live in Germany, if you count Father Jews too. About 80% of them come from the former Soviet Union. A Russian-dominated cultural Jewish space, as Diana Pinte would call it, a cultural Jewish space formed outside of the Jewish communities and beyond the religious institutions and practices. And that is Belkin's German Jewry 2. This German Jewry 2 is by no means a copy or an inheritance of German Jewry before 1933. Although it can connect culturally to the works of the great German Jewish authors, composers, and artists, it is religiously, demographically, and socio-culturally completely different. Really a new German Jewry. Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union are now emancipated German citizens. They hold a German passport, but they bring the Jewish legacy of the Soviet Union in their socio-cultural baggage. Remnants of a completely secular, deliberately atheistic upbringing and a Samizdat Judaism, the Russian language, literature, music, and art, mixed with some Yiddish and Ukrainian elements. Furthermore, the post-Soviet Jewish migrants are characterized by the Ashkenazi East European cuisine, the lack of religious education and practice, their experience with everyday Soviet anti-Semitism, and the awareness of not being just the victims of Hitler, but being the winners of the Second World War and the winners over Hitler. Tens of thousands of Jewish soldiers in the Red Army have defeated Hitler and the Nazis. On May 9th, every year, the day of unconditional surrender to the Red Army in Berlin, Jewish veterans of the Red Army who came to Germany in the 1990s and who are age 90-something today spend their retirement in Berlin and have formed Jewish Veterans Association. They celebrate the 9th of May in their Red Army uniforms decorated with medals of honor and their victory over Nazi Germany at the memorial in Berlin-Treptow. And they do this not as victims, but as victors. They are now German citizens who rightly receive a small pension from the German state. Meanwhile, their grandchildren have graduated from German high schools and studied at German and European universities. They were supported with state scholarships by the German Jewish Scholarship Fund ELES, which was founded in 2009 and forms the largest network of young Jewish intellectuals and academics in Germany. Those grandchildren are now successful lawyers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and doctors. Post-Soviet Jews have written a new, also economically very successful German Jewish literature, dealing with their Jewish Russian descent, including authors such as Vladimir Wertlieb, Vladimir Kaminer, Katra Petrovskaya, Olga Gražnova, Lena Gorelik, Dimitri Kapitelmann, or most recently Sasha Mariana Salzman. to name just the most famous ones. This is not a literature of Jews for Jews. It addresses the broader German audience. Salzmann quite naturally works with non-Jewish colleagues in her theater productions, just as the Jewish-Russian-German filmmaker Arkady Kaet developed his now famous short film Mazel Tov Cocktail together with his non-Jewish friend Mickey Patch. Or the pianist and music professor Yasha Nemtsov plays with non-Jewish musicians and teaches Jewish music to non-Jewish students. Post-Soviet Jews have long since arrived self-confidently and with equal rights as Jews in German culture, politics and society. Some even established themselves as stars. They have their own Jewish voice, but also publicly insist on their Jewish origins, and at the same time they are successfully integrated into the culture and politics of the Federal Republic of Germany. They do not hide their origins from the countries of the former Soviet Union and from the Eastern European cultural areas, nor their fate as migrants. Culturally, German Jewry 2 is a hybrid, post-migrant, mixed culture in German language with Russian, Yiddish and Hebrew elements. According to Belkin, despite the Shoah, according to Belkin, this is a historically unique situation for both sides, the Jews and the non-Jews in Germany, despite the Shoah and after the abyss of the Shoah. For the post-Soviet Jews, as Belkin puts it, German Jewry 2 means finding a possible homeland in Germany. For the Federal Republic and its majority society, German Jewry 2 means a second chance of permanent and peaceful coexistence of non-Jewish and Jewish Germans in Germany. The next slide. If Dmitry Belkin, with his thesis of German Jewry 2, represents a position of self-confident integration of Jews into German society without renouncing their Eastern European post-Soviet fractured Yiddishkeit, his antipode, Max Czolek, represents a position of disintegration. Disintegrate yourself is his imperative. And this is the book. Disintegrate yourself, you can take it. Disintegrate yourself is his imperative for all Jews in Germany, and he justifies this imperative in detail in his 2018 book of the same name. Czolek organized and carried out a disintegration congress in 2017, where he made his imperative known to a broader public. And disintegration was practiced in artistic performances such as burning Hitler's Mein Kampf. In 2017, the newly established biannual magazine Yalta, Positionen zur jüdischen Gegenwart, Yalta Positions on the Jewish Present, which is co-edited by Czolek, published a whole issue on the subject of disintegration with multiple voices, Jewish voices, talking about disintegration and how this might work. Czolek is by no means alone with his call for the disintegration of Jews from the German majority and consensus culture. He is merely the trendsetter of a whole generation of young German Jews who want to step out from the monotony of German Holocaust remembrance culture and from religious paternalism in the predominantly Orthodox Jewish communities. Czolek was born in East Berlin in 1987. He comes from a Jewish communist family in the GDR nomenklatura. His grandfather, the influential Jewish editor Walter Czolek, was a notorious Stalinist. But Max goes his own way as a poet, dramaturg, and publicist. Because unlike his grandfather, he publicly professes his Jewishness, writes, acts, and agitates as a Jew who, he autobiographically notes, had the privilege of being part of a generation of young Jews in Germany who, for the first time since 1933, have enjoyed a state-sponsored Jewish upbringing, from kindergarten to the Jewish elementary school, the Jewish Moses Mendelssohn Gymnasium, and doctoral sponsorship through Jewish scholarship fund ELES, where young Jewish intellectuals, artists, and scientists in Germany work today do networking. Czolek also sees himself as the self-confident voice of this young generation who act outside of the Jewish communities and institutions, and yet, as Jews, can pursue their agenda and are noticed in the German public and in the media. They no longer want to integrate themselves into a supposedly homogeneous German majority culture and its discourses. Rather, they want to assert their own diverse Jewish position in the general culture of the Federal Republic of Germany that has long since become hybrid and diverse as a result of decades of immigration with other diverse minorities, especially the German Muslims. Disintegration opens a political and artistic dialogue between Jews and other minorities in German society. Disintegrate is an imperative for young Jews who want to publicly demonstrate their religious, artistic, and political autonomy in the German majority society. Jews should not become part of the German majority society. On the contrary, they should belong to the diverse minorities that assert and defend themselves against the majority's pressure to integrate. Dare to be different. It is precisely the strength of the pluralistic society in Germany today that it can tolerate this disintegration. Czolek does not deny the importance of post-Soviet Jewish migration at all. Only the Jewish immigrants should not do what the German majority society expects of them, namely to integrate seamlessly into the majority society and thus create the illusion for the Germans that the Jews who were once expelled from Germany by the Nazis are finally back. The catastrophe of the Shoah is overcome and the wound of the Shoah is finally healing. Czolek denies that this post-Soviet migration decisively changed the non-Jewish German society's image of the Jews. According to his thesis, since 1945 and to this day, Jews in Germany have always only been associated with anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and Israel, but are not perceived as an independent minority with their own current, new, changeable cultural and religious identity. We need the new slide. According to a term coined by Michael Bodemann, German society and politics play memorial theater, Gedächtnistheater, that's the title of the book, Memorial Theater. The Jews of today do not represent themselves, but the dead Jews of yesterday. In German politics of remembrance, Jews are perpetually marked as victims of anti-Semitism and the Shoah, while the good Germans fight for Holocaust compensation, Wiedergutmachung, and moral rehabilitation by erecting large memorials and museums for dead Jews, commemorating the Shoah. They are fighting anti-Semitism and have unshakable sympathies for the state of Israel, no matter what nonsense, what measures contrary to international law, and what acts of oppression and injustice the government of Israel decide there. This memorial theater, Gedächtnistheater, is not at all about the living Jews of today. They are not really perceived. It's about the Germans and their self-image clouded by the Shoah. In the German culture of guilt, Jews are committed to the role of victims and descendants of the victims. For the children and grandchildren of the perpetrators, they figure as objects of compensation and atonement for the purpose of the desired repair and normalization of the relationships between Germans and Jews. The return of Jews to Germany and their stay, be it the DPs from Eastern Europe immediately after the war, the remigrants of the 1950s, the Israelis Yordim, or today the post-Soviet migrants, has the function in German collective psychology to reduce, if not to eradicate, the feelings of guilt and the shame of the non-Jewish Germans in view of the Shoah, the function to stabilize the disturbed German self-image and to enable a new, purified normality. The Memorial Theater, Gedächtnistheater, serves to relieve the Germans of the role of perpetrators, the change from the bad German past to a good German present and future, the collective purification and becoming good, Gutwerdung, of the Germans, as Eike Geisel has called this phantasm. Max Czarek recommends to the German Jews against this division of roles in the German Memorial Theater and its production, disintegrate. The non-Jewish German majority society has to come to terms with its own past and must not functionalize the Jews in that process. The Jews should refuse the role intended for them as assimilated, integrated and adjusted fellow citizens of the Jewish faith, Mitbürger jüdischen Glaubens, into the Judeo-Christian, so-called Judeo-Christian Occident. The Jews should dare to be different from this majority. Instead, they should insist on their uniqueness. They should be uncomfortable and nonconformist, a nonconformist minority alongside other nonconformist minorities in a German society that is no longer homogeneous, but ideally diverse and open to diversity. Instead of disappearing, well-adjusted, well-paid, and well-integrated in a bourgeois majority society, Jews should insist on their individuality as a self-confident minority and strive for and enter into alliances with other minorities in Germany, especially with the German Muslims. Jews in Germany should break free of the philo-Semitic embrace and the German culture of guilt. They should stop being the well-recognized good minority in the Christian society because of their long German past. Instead, they should become uncomfortable, not forgive the Germans, not forget them, not reconcile themselves, insist on revenge and retribution, refuse commemorative rituals, attack German racism and the discrimination of all minorities, and criticize anti-Semitism everywhere. Disintegration means I don't take part, but it does not mean I stay out of it. I have now the choice either to talk something, to say something about German Jewry and the identity dispute before the Nazi era, or I could come to an end. I'm now over time, I think.
We have 5 to 10 minutes if you...
Okay, so I go on with the paper. The question of integration versus disintegration in German society after 1990 has never led to a public or journalistic debate between Belkin and Czarek, although both have known and respected each other personally for many years from the context of Ellis. Belkin has published in the Yalta magazine, co-edited by Czarek, and Czarek has attended events at Ellis and even at the Zentralrat, the Central Council of Jews. In addition, the discourse about new Jewish identities in Germany today has many more and different participants and positions. However, few are as distinctive as those of Belkin and Czarek. This discourse is remotely reminiscent of the Jewish identity debates of the Kaiserreich and the Weimar Republic. I need the new slide. As early as in 1901, Martin Buber had called for a Jewish renaissance, thereby initiating a debate about the religious, but above all the spiritual, cultural and even aesthetic renewal of the German Jews, who had been largely and successfully integrated into Wilhelmine civil society. Buber's early impetus for a self-confident intellectual self-renewal of German Jewry was followed by a renaissance of Jewish intellectual life in the Weimar Republic after the end of the First World War, which Michael Brenner describes in detail in his The Renaissance of Jewish Culture in Weimar Germany, 1969. And also, this is the next picture, Delphine Bechtel analyzes the same Jewish renewal in her French habilitation La Renaissance culturelle juive, Europe centrale et orientale, 1887 jusqu'à 1930, for Eastern Europe too. Jews turned to their own religious and rabbinical sources and were fascinated by the discovery of authentic forms of popular Jewish piety in Hasidism in Eastern Europe. In Zionism, in Jewish socialism, and in the Jewish youth movement, new anti-bourgeois forms of life were tried out. New Jewish learning associations, schools, magazines, and publishing houses emerged, and new Jewish literature, avant-garde Jewish music, and for the first time even Jewish films appeared. After the First World War, the acculturation and sometimes assimilation of Jews into German bourgeois society in the Kaiserreich was followed, at least in parts of German Jewry, by a self-confident intellectual, cultural, and often also political dissimulation in the Weimar Republic. And the next slide. While the most famous Jewish philosopher of the German Empire, Hermann Cohen, in Deutschtum und Judentum in 1915, still insisted on the downright providential spiritual alliance and close relationships between Germans and Jews, on Kant's union with the biblical prophets, the popular Jewish best-selling author Jakob Wassermann, in that debate, triggered by Cohen's Germanness and Jewishness, in his autobiographical pamphlet Mein Weg als Deutscher und Jude, My Way as German and Jew in 1921, points to the ambivalence of life as a German and as a Jew at the same time. Because of anti-Semitism, Jews in German society always remained the other Germans, no matter how hard they tried to integrate successfully into German society. Despite far-reaching bourgeois integration, the German Jews always remain first and foremost Jews. The particularity and also the loneliness of the German Jew in German society remains visible despite bourgeois emancipation and integration. Jakob Wassermann's warning about the anti-Semitism in German society was only right. From 1933 onwards, National Socialism used violence and laws to dissimulate and disintegrate the German Jews from the German state in German society, declared them non-Germans by law, expelled them, deported them, and murdered them. Belkin and Scholek are only too familiar with the history and the fate of the first German Jewry between assimilation and dissimulation, integration and disintegration. But they react to them differently. Belkin does not call for assimilation or acculturation of German Jewry too. The post-Soviet migrants are the new German Jewry, whether they want it or not, whether German society wants it or not. This is a demographic fact, and this fact will initiate a long process of social-cultural negotiations and a long process of mutual acculturation. Open end. Scholek, on the other hand, speaks of Jewish self-empowerment from the outset. Disintegrate yourself means for all Jews who live in Germany and come from Israel or from the former Soviet Union or from the US. Don't be Jews for the Germans. Be Jews for yourself. Fight back, be self-confident, be watchful, be uncomfortable. Despite all these contradictions, the positions of Belkin and Scholek have one thing in common. Whether integration or disintegration, the Jews all want to live in Germany and stay in Germany. Zionism is not an option. This distinguishes this current Jewish identity debate from Buber's call for a Jewish renaissance and from the debates of the Weimar Republic, where the most radical form of dissimulation was Aliyah to Eretz Israel. Aliyah plays almost no role in German Jewry today. And I show the last slide. This is the most recent book on Israelis in Germany. So in 2021, exactly 149 persons emigrated from Germany to Israel. 149. In the same year, hundreds of Israelis immigrated to Germany, as has been the case for the past 15 or 20 years. There are many reasons for this migration of Israeli Jews to Germany, primarily economic, professional, but also cultural, moral, and political. To discuss the reasons of this asymmetric Israeli migration to Germany would be another lecture, but let's call this process Israeli disintegration.
Thank you very much, Professor Schulte, for this very insightful and thought-provoking presentation. I'm still stuck on your last words, which seem to get more grave by the minute, basically, of Israeli disintegration. But I want to thank you, of course, for your very thoughtful putting together of these distinct Jewish intellectual voices and this juxtaposition, which really, for me, was very enlightening about the Jewish-German debates, which we have seen through the last years, and there were obviously many more. And I also very much enjoyed your thought about the historical continuities or discontinuities or parallels, maybe, with German Jewry 1.0, one could say. Of course, as you mentioned, or before the Holocaust also, there was a strong impact of Eastern European Jewry on German Jewry. In Weimar Republic, I think it was about 20% of Jews in Germany were actually from more from Poland than maybe from Russia, Ukraine, but also. And I see a certain irony here when we talk about the German former acculturated or wanted to be acculturated German Jewry and feared the Ostjuden, right, for their showing their Judaism so openly and being so different. It seems to be the other way around here, where the Ostjude seems to be very integrated or wants to integrate into German culture, and the Jew from actually Germany wants to disintegrate. But there's also there are other differences, I think, in their positions, not only within Germany but also within the Jewish society. Belkin seems to be part of the majority of the Jews in Germany, right? With former Soviet Jewry being now really the dominant majority, and Cholik is part of a minority, we could say. Even smaller when we take into account that he's actually not from West. His grandfather or his family is not from Western Germany, where we had the 8,000 Bäre, and then we had in the GDR, I don't know, even a few hundreds probably at the end. The numbers vary in this regard. And an additional issue which I found interesting in this is that both of them are actually what you call father Jews, right? Belkin converted to Judaism and became a full Jew, let's put it that way, in the German debate also, while Cholik did not. And as you will know, but maybe not everyone here, Cholik actually was very much attacked in a later debate on this by another of these intellectuals, by
Maxim
Biller, exactly, who blatantly basically told him publicly that he's not the right to speak on behalf of German or as a Jew in Germany. And that was not enough. The Zentralrat, actually, Josef Schuster, the head of the Jewish Council, basically backed this position and told him that he's wrongly speaking as a Jew. So the issue that he's not halachically Jewish makes him not really a Jew. So all this leads me to the question or the thought: what role does their different positions in German Jewish society play in this debate, right? Where one is very much on the margins, you could say, in some ways. In other ways, he's very public, obviously, and the other one seems to kind of represent a majority. As a question thought. And another, that brings me to another issue that I thought of when having the pleasure to read your lecture before, and now hear it again. There seems to be an elephant in the room here, which is the Central Council of German Jews, right? Because German Jewry is highly centralized, actually, much like a church these days. They pay church or taxes to this, and the Central Council kind of reserves the right to speak on behalf of German Jewry. And I think much of what Czolek attacks is actually this Central Council of German Jewry. And Bodemann's critique, I think it was in the 90s, was actually this culture of being the good Jews and then reminding the Germans of anti-Semitism and playing into this game was very much, I think, directed at the Central Council. The question is really how much Belkin, on the other hand, is part of this. Obviously, he works for the Zentralrat, but he also represents the new Jews which is not really much anymore very neatly fitting into the Central Council, I think, or changing German Jewry, as you mentioned, very strongly. So I was thinking, how much do they differ in this respect? Can they come together in a way, right? Are they both working towards a new approach to Judaism in different nuances, obviously, but yeah. So the question is, not integration into. Well, you also said, or Max Czolek speaks out against this integration into German majority culture. But the question is, what is German majority culture? Obviously, also I think for Belkin, taking into account, and that would be my next question of thought for discussion, how much actually this German Jewry is German Jewry, even though Belkin provocatively probably uses this, but obviously it's not only the fact that majority is not really from Germany, maybe finds their Jewish identity in Germany, but it's also highly transnational in a way, right? If you look at Berlin, where I think the center, at least of these intellectuals, is, there's so many American Jewish influences. You have the American Jewish Committee, you have the Spinner community, you have all kinds of communities. You have, in Munich, for example, the non-Orthodox community is basically an Anglo community. So the question is really, how much are we talking about German Jewry or something more transnational? And obviously that brings also in your last point, the Israelis, right? And so my last thought or a question would be, it's very fascinating also your point about Aliyah, that so little German Jews or Jews in Germany actually really care to come here. But on the other hand, how much does Israel play a role in these debates? That's what I was asking myself, because as we know, Zionism in Israel is a very strong pillar of diaspora Jewish identity, right? Not German only, Americans. My question would be, and maybe another of these very nice intellectuals that you mentioned, Dimitri Kapitelman, wrote a fascinating book, one of my favorite books, where he basically describes, he's also from the former Soviet Union, where he describes a journey with his father to Israel. And in Israel he understands that he's not Israeli, an Israeli Jew, but he's actually connected to the place where he comes from. I wouldn't go as far as, I don't think he calls himself a German Jew, but his conclusion is that's the place where I live, that's the place where the ones I love live, so I should make it my place somehow, right? So I wonder how does Israel and the whole, obviously there's a whole fierce debate, as we can all good and well understand from this country, fierce debate about Israeli politics, but it seems to be a very strong pillar of Jewish identity still. How does that play into this debate, if at all? so much for my thoughts. Thank you very much again.
Yeah. Thank you for the comments. To start, perhaps with your remark concerning what is the variety of German Jews that we have today, of Jews living in Germany today and holding a German passport, because the German passport is that makes them German Jews. It's not a known culture of their own. It's not the descent, be it from Ukraine or from Israel or from New York City. It's the German passport they hold.
Language?
And it becomes ever more the German language, because you mentioned the North American Jews who come to and now reside in Germany. They are still in the process of acculturation and learning German, whereas the Israelis partly keep their Hebrew identity. You have Hebrew-speaking kindergartens and Hebrew-speaking newspapers now, and a printing press, first Hebrew printing press in Berlin. So you have a variety of cultural and linguistic options, but the German passport is something basic, and so you have also and this, I think Belkin would agree to saying, okay, this is a very diverse, also gender diverse, new German Jewry, but it is dominated by post-Soviet Jews, above all in the German provinces, where you have Russian-speaking Jewish synagogues and rabbis in Dessau, or in provincial cities where there was no synagogue for 80 years, and now you have a Jewish community of 1,000 members, and they speak Russian, they pray in Russian, and they have these and so I think that Belkin in general is right, that it is a very diverse Jewish population in Germany, with a dominant Russian-speaking now, and this is even more complicated. What happens now after Putin invaded the Ukraine? Now they start being not post-Soviet Jews, but Ukrainian Jews, coming from Kiev, and now this is very special, because most Russian Jews in the Ukraine spoke Russian and are not part of the Ukrainian culture. So this is a cultural split that is entirely new. A Berlin rabbi told me that 3 elderly Russian-speaking ladies came to him and asked him to say a brocha on Putin. and you have the other veterans of the Soviet Union. The majority of these post-Soviet migrants came from Ukraine, and they are pro-Ukraine now. So this adds a new language and a new facet of element of diversity in this. So it's a multicultural. If they belong to a Jewish community or not, it's a multicultural Jewish population in Germany today, what is also interesting is that, and that's the elephant in the room you mentioned, the Zentralrat accepted as Jewish community members only halachic Jews. That means descendants from a Jewish mother. and by this excluded the Father Jews from being members of the Jewish communities, and being and this is that was a decision taken in the 1990s already, and that makes it very difficult for all these Father Jews like Belkin to join a religious community. So this is why Belkin converted to become formally a member of a synagogue community. Nonetheless, the majority also of the Father Jews, they accept being Jewish, and they do that in public, and that is really new. They don't hide in the public. They are identified, and they self-identify as Jews, and this is new in this situation. And ironically, and I will stop with that and open the floor for questions. It was Cholek who in Israel would be accepted as a Jew. According to the law of return, he is a Jew. Only his grandfather, the Stalinist Walter Cholek, he has one Jewish grandfather, but in Israel he would count as a Jew. And in that okay, that's you. I would say that's your problem. So you will have more Yodim to Berlin. So send them all to Berlin. In Berlin, they will be accepted as Jews. That's not the problem. So, what happens now is that, and that's an irony of this. I mean, Belkin and Cholek are very careful. They know one another very well, and Belkin went silent when the debate about Cholek being a Jew or not a Jew. He didn't say a word about that because this was a pitiful public debate in Germany, where again the Zentralrat, I think, took the wrong decision. Because it would have been easy for Cholek to say, "Oh, in Israel I'm a Jew." What do you say, you Zentralrat? Where are you? Who are you? In Israel I'm a Jew. Why should I be excluded from German Jewry by a Zentralrat president? So he could have, but he does not. He does not identify as a Zionist. He does not care about. He cares about being a Jew in Germany, and culturally he says, "I'm a Jew, and nobody can." And he speaks Hebrew, and he knows Hebrew, and he writes poems entitled Me'or Einaim, with allusions to Lurianic Kabbalah, And yes, and they declare he's not a Jew. Come on, yeah, come on. It's ridiculous. And I mean, the whole debate ended. Now it's faded away. Nobody can exclude him from being culturally a Jew. So this debate ends, and it's very funny that since 2017, Cholek, the Disintegration Cholek, had asked for Jewish-Muslim alliances in Germany, and did so publicly and so. And Belkin, in the last 2 years, is the representative of the Zentralrat to organize Shalom Aleikum, the official Zentralrat dialogue between Jews and Muslims. So they're actually doing the same thing. And the Zentralrat is, and that is my last observation, the Zentralrat is changing positions. Now, in Schuster's terms, the Zentralrat has now really become open, more open to changes, and has developed a lot of political awareness that Germany's Jewry is in a process of pluralization, of cultural and religious pluralization. I mean, really the last remark, Berlin is right now the only city in Europe where you have 4 different rabbinical seminars. You have a Chabad yeshiva, you have a liberal rabbinical seminar, you have a conservative rabbinical seminar, and you have a neo-orthodox Rabbiner Seminar zu Berlin. So you have 4 different rabbinical seminars in Berlin. This is unique in Europe, and this is, let's say, a fact that shows how, even not only culturally but also in terms of religion, the German Jewry is open to pluralization, and this is how it's done.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions. Michael, you want to start? And then Ruth?
Thank you very much. This is fascinating. I have no idea whatsoever about the topic, so I apologize. It's fascinating. I want to pick up on the last point you did with both Chiziak and Belkin doing outreach religion. And I just wanted to point out that your comparison to Weimar Republic actually points to sort of a blind spot in your presentation. And that is the fact that you need 2 to tango. German culture and society has changed radically. We're dealing now with a culture that, especially in regard to minorities and the immigrants. And this is a German aspect that you see in German Judaism 2.0 that maybe you didn't see before. So you need to integrate into your perspective how German society changed as well, and how these new voices are echoed within the new Jewish culture that is developing in Berlin and elsewhere.
You're right. I just introduced this comparison because I wanted to. Of course, the German majority society today is far more liberal and anti-Semitism, public anti-Semitism is taboo, whereas in the Weimar Republic that was current. This is the main difference, but we still have all, and this is the subtext of Czolek and Belkin, is that we had a racist and anti-Muslim uprise, and we have now a racist party in the parliament that opposes the integration of Muslims in the German societies. So the Jews are played against the Muslims. Since 2015, we have in the right-wing discourse we have a separation. Jews are accepted as part of German society, and Muslims are banned from integration into the German society by saying they will never integrate. They have this primitive religion, and so you have and there again. Both Czolek and Belkin, in their talk about Muslim-Jewish alliances, so the alliances of two men, they don't play this game of speaking about even right-wing CDU was talking about Jüdisch-christliches Abendland, the Jewish-Christian Occident, being acceptable and a model for German society, but by excluding the Muslims from that. And now the discourse of Belkin and Czolek alike is a reaction to this right-wing majority discourse by saying, no, Jews are a minority and Muslims are a minority, and we need this alliance against the overwhelming racist and anti-Muslim exclusion discourses that have the upper hand in the political right-wing parties in Germany.
Thank you very much. It is not my field, but as a former Soviet Union Jew, I have a question, and I just want to bring into discussion also kind of a debate regarding what we call a thick and thin Jewish identity, because you spoke about Yiddish and you spoke about this kind of harmonistic assimilation. And I'm thinking about the Russian Jewry as kind of a society that I know, the selfish and the exploitative, using the German facilities but staying outside the German world, and also the effects of post-Soviet slavery, we can say, on German Judaism. Another question I want to ask, I will explain. Talking about thin and thick identity, we see indeed that in this post-Soviet Jewry, they used to live kind of a hybridic life, sometimes keeping kind of rituals, Pesach, and at the same time totally assimilated and feeling themselves not Jewish at all. So after the migration to Germany, it's also very interesting to see what happened to many Russian Jews, how much their identity increasing in the sense of feeling themselves Jewish regarding mitzvot, rituals, and so on. I'm also asking myself what Belkin would write about the third chance, talking about kind of Ukraine, Russian, German, new identity that will raise 20 years. Maybe, I don't know, what you think about it.
First, Belkin in his autobiography, Germania, is very clear about the fact that his parents, who followed, he migrated in 1993, his parents 2 years later followed their son to Germany. They are still Russian Jews, and they never made it into German society. The German is too weak. No chance ever for his father to find work again, as opposed to Dmitri Kapitelman, where his father opened shop in Leipzig, but and integrated much better into German society. But the majority of the first generation who came in the 1990s until today is not really integrated into the German society. And they cannot. They are linguistically not able. There have been. It was very difficult for the immigrants from Russia to be accepted in Germany in the professional life, because even the diplomas of engineers, of medical doctors, were not accepted in Germany, so they had to renew studies, and it was very difficult for them. Till this day, what they paid for their insurances for the pension are not accepted in Germany, so they get little funding. Very many of those migrants today live on the social minimum in Germany, so they receive Sozialhilfe. So I did not want to paint this painting as a wonderful example of successful integration. This is not the case, but culturally, the second, and now we are talking about the third generation. They're in the school system, they're in the professional system, they are extremely successful, and this integration works. Is not a religious integration; it's a cultural integration and a social integration, and that takes place every day. And I have been on the council of Eles, and Eles had last year had 1,000 had given scholarships to more than 1,000 Jewish students on the basic level and on the PhD level, and among these around 1,000 students that received the scholarship, you have a majority of 70-80% who are descendants of Soviet Jews. So, and they are entirely integrated in the university system. There will be the leading elite. In LS, you meet the academic elite and the new leaders of the communities in 10 years or 20 years. Some of the alumni of LS are professors now. So what you see is it's a very quick integration. And they are self-confident and they have no reason to hide their Jewishness. So we see a demographic change, but also a cultural change, and the integration is the integration of the second and the third generation, which happens there. And the old ones really staying rather with this. This is incredible. They had in Berlin the veterans meetings of the not only of the Red Army veterans. They had the U-boat veteran of the submarine veterans of the Red Army have a special subgroup of they come in their uniforms with the medals of honor and meet weekly in Berlin. This is their identity. Has nothing to do with religion and nothing to do with. It's the roots that they have in the Soviet Union.
Next up is Jan, afterwards Anat.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. I have two somewhat related questions. The first being, I think there are many questions that are debated there that are obviously a uniqueness to German Jewry, but there are also some universal questions involved there. How should a minority relate to the state? How should a minority relate to to wider society? The things that are being discussed in Germany, but also abroad, and debated in the United Kingdom, that are debated in minority communities in the United States and elsewhere. Should this label of being a model minority, for example, should that be accepted? Or is that, and I think Danny Kranz, who contributed to that volume, does really fantastic work in showing how this idea of German Jews being a model minority is misused to in then turn oppress and repress German Muslims, for example. So I wonder whether this question of not only of a Muslim-Jewish dialogue in Germany, but also this question of, well, how should minorities relate to that state in general? Whether this is part of this broader debate coming from people like Belkin and Jolik and somewhat, and also how is this debated with other minority communities in Germany? And somewhat related to that, you touched on it a little bit, but how are these changes affecting memory policy and practices of memory in Germany, especially memory of the Second World War and of the Holocaust in particular? How is this idea of disintegration? What is then the positive impulse towards what kind of new memory should be practiced? Did this debate over the German Catechism that was held last year, did that play into that? How does and also I think about half a year ago there was a certain debate over the considerable number of converts in German Jewish communities who have an entirely different family history, to say the least. How does that play into the debates over commemoration with the different Soviet and German Jewish experiences and so on? Yeah.
Okay, let's start with the converts. That's, I think, is an overrated discussion. It has been brought up, but all in all, statistically, in the 2000s, 2,000 persons have converted to Judaism in Germany. 2,000 out of 275,000. This is less than 1%. So conversion is not really does not really play a great role in all of that. What has been criticized is that converts become rabbis and convert other, so that you have a policy of become professors that's from convert to pervert, you know.
Maybe you can say a word
about Professor Homolka. No. Yeah, so. But what you say about Jews as a model minority, as opposed to Muslims as an excluded, or this is a discourse that, I mean, rightfully the Zentralrat and also most political parties want to avoid. And it was already the policy of the Merkel, which was a conservative government, was to build up in parallel to Illes, to the Ernst Ludwig Studienwerk. You had the foundation of Avicenna scholarship, which gives the German state organizes a scholarship parallel to the Jewish students for Muslim students. And the Avicenna is much greater. The Avicenna Foundation is much larger because the Muslim population in Germany is much larger. So you have many more Muslim students who now get scholarships of the German state. And in order to integrate the Muslim migrants families into German societies and to have a new generation of young Muslims who become academics. And this is the policy of a conservative German government, of the Merkel government already. And it was very funny to see that really in organizational terms and also in political terms, Illes helped to build up the Muslim Avicenna Scholarship Foundation, and Illes was the model, because Illes was the first minority scholarship foundation, and Avicenna was the second. So, but I think it's we are not speaking, and Belkin and Scholik alike, they are not speaking about Jewish-Muslim dialogue. They are talking about Jewish-Muslim alliances, which is a political term, and I think that is what is wanted. They want more than dialogue. They want, and they do not shy away from those alliances, and they are not deterred from those alliances just because some of the Muslim migrants are anti-Zionism and do commit anti-Semitic acts. It's a prevention of anti-Semitism among Muslims in Germany that you have these alliances and dialogues, and these dialogues are not among academics. What Belkin does is a dialogue among Jewish-Muslim dialogue among merchants and nurses and medical doctors and lawyers. So it's a professional. It's on the professional level. It's not only academics and youngsters. I think it's very thoughtful what they do there. And the change of memory culture is clear. There has already been. I alluded to that, and Belkin claims this. There has been already. A change in the memory culture, because German Jews until 1990 were considered the victims of the Holocaust. Now the migrants from the Soviet Union consider themselves as the victors, because Russian Jews were part of the Red Army who conquered Germany, who defeated Hitler. So they are not the eternal victims of Hitler and of Nazism. They have defeated Nazism, and they are back in Germany. They are in Berlin because Hitler was defeated. So this was already a rupture in the memory culture, and I think that the young generation now turns rather to the present and to the future. The epitome of the old and old-fashioned German memory culture was the Shoah Memorial in Berlin, and that was opened in the early 2000s, like the Jewish Museum. That was still the old memory culture. But now, for example, I think that the institutions like ILES and the rabbinical seminars, they are looking to the future. They are no more part of the memorial culture in Germany. They are the construction of a new future of Jews in Germany, funded by the German state. So I think that even in the political class, the consciousness of what has to be done, not to be only, to have this memory culture, but to have a culture of doing together, performing a new German Jewish future somehow, and to deal with minorities in Germany in another way, and that this is beyond the guilt culture and the shame culture of the 1950s to the 2000s. So I think this is very much progress in the German political and cultural consciousness that takes place here.
Matt?
Yes, I wanted to continue Jan's line and open it broader a little bit, because for me it sounds a lot like the debate in any second or third generation of immigrants. And not only minority, but immigrants, the debates about integration or non-integration. If you look into France and what's written there about the generation that has no idea how Morocco looks like, but they still should feel somehow. And okay, so this is one direction. And the second is coming from Poland, obviously, and the territories on the border, 2 hours from Berlin. Not all Soviet immigrants managed to get to Germany. Some of them stayed in Poland. And again, also in Poland, being from Ukraine and from Soviet Union was an advantage. We didn't like Ukrainians at that time, in the 90s. And Judaism, being Jewish, at some point they discovered this is their only way to integrate somehow into the society, and not into the society at all, to find some kind of organization or some place, some kind of home, not anything else. And the Jewish community there, they found a common language with people who were deported during the war and came back after the war, also from the Soviet Union. And also today, there are so many communities, Jewish communities in Poland, are in touch with those small communities in Dachau, as you mentioned, or there are even meetings and projects together. They find common language. And the question here is, the first question was about opening broader, and the second is about the influence of the fact that they were from the Soviet Union, not from any other place, but the importance that they were from the Soviet Union, and quite unpopular place to be an immigrant from. How important was that?
Well, I agree that, of course, this happens. This type of discussion takes place in all migration societies, second or third generation, and but it's still, I think it is striking that Germany, along perhaps sometimes I think about Poland, they are the countries in Europe where Jewish identities are discussed publicly. In France, I do not know of any kind of this discussion in Great Britain. This is not something that I feel is publicly discussed. The place of Jews in the British society, is that publicly discussed? Okay, so I missed that. But it's I think that it is part of a public debate and a political debate. What the position of Jews in a society is, shows that this Germany still has a very unique position anyway, because of the guilt in the Shoah. But also this discussion is very interesting. It would be perhaps interesting to discuss that and to do a comparison with American Jewish discussions in the early 20th century, where you had all the migrants from Eastern Europe, and then and you had the mostly German-based migration to the U.S. in the 19th century, and what the cultural clash there was, and how they kind of muddled through a new American Jewish identity that can be done. I did not know about this, what happened in Poland, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, compared to France, in France you have Aliyah every year of a few thousand French Jews who go to
a lot can come back.
but still, you have considerable numbers of Jews making Aliyah in Germany. It's not a question.
Okay, two more questions. First, Cedric.
Yeah. So I want to address two other elephants in the room a little bit. First, the difference between Jews and Muslims concerning nationality in Germany. I'm not sure, but as far as I understood, if you are Jew coming from the former Soviet Union, you can relatively easily get German citizenship. And if you are a Turk, that was the first, or if you are a Muslim immigrant, you will have to wait very long, or you will never get it. So because of the conception of citizenship in Germany. This difference is a very old story. We have the same in France with the Décret Crémieux, famous Décret Crémieux, and I don't know enough about England, but it might be something very important to think about. The second elephant is the absence of denazification in Germany after World War II, especially in West Germany, and the role that the Shoah remembrance played in this difficult, let's say, the first 2 decades, basically after 45, most of the former Nazis remain in place. Sometimes they were even brought back. There is this term in German scholarship of renazification of the state after 48, 49. and the role that the Shoah remembrance plays instead of a real coping of the German society, not with the Jews but with the Nazis. So I would like to see if Schulte Disintegration is playing with this difficult problem in Germany, and well, that's it.
Mm-hmm. To your first point, yes, it has always been difficult to get a German passport until the 2000s, because it was the dogma of Christian Democrats to say we are not an immigration country. Germany is not an Einwanderungsland. It's not a country ready to accept migration. And that was a political dogma until the early 2000s. Now the political class has changed, and they have, even the Christian Democrats have understood that we need migration. So the political class has changed politics as to migration, and it has become in the 2000s much easier to get a German passport. And the migration, this post-Soviet migration of Jews was perhaps the first step in to make it easier for migrants to have the German passport. You cannot compare that, but it is striking that the laws have already been changed under the Green and Social Democratic government of Gerhard Schröder. They have changed the conditions for receiving a German passport, and this was continued in the Merkel era, so that still you have the discrimination of the Syrian refugees coming to Germany. But the question of the German passport is not as important as access to the labor market, because integration mostly is linked to professional success and to the participation in the labor market. If you keep migrants outside by whether they have a German passport or not, once they have access to the labor market, integration into German society is easy. It's a very Protestant working ethics still in Germany, and integration works via the labor market. So, and the passport question is very interesting. That now we have accepted in the last year more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees, and they have immediate access to the German labor market. And you have Ukrainians working all over the place. All of a sudden,
for example,
and the Syrians the politics of the Merkel government as to the Syrians was still racist and was anti-Muslim, but I think now among those Syrian refugees, you have the first cases. It becomes clear there will be war in Syria going on, so they cannot return. There is no hope that they return. So I foresee that they will open the German labor market also to the Syrians. It's only a question of time, and then the question of German passport is secondary. Is really secondary. The integration, of course, the integration of post-Soviet Jews was much easier because they received the German passport immediately. But you still have in that first generation people who are not integrated in German society, although they have a German passport, because they have no access to the labor market and to the professions. So these are two different things, and you must treat this differently. Yes, Gedächtnistheater, Bodemann already in the 1990s, and Czolek are aware that there was this whole culture of Shoah remembrance instead of a real denazification. And but the problem kind of has been demographically solved because the perpetrators are dead. So today there is no need to cover the denazification by Shoah remembrance. So the memory culture also has changed. I would say it has grossly changed, and it's no more a qui-pro quo. So I think we should look carefully at that. I think that Czolek all the time refers to the 1990s and to Bodemann does not do justice to the changes in it's mediatic change, it's a social change in the memory of the Shoah that has already taken place. So I think sometimes what Czolek does is also a bit old-fashioned, because he refers to a remembrance culture of the Shoah that is outdated, that is really the 1990s and not the 21st century. I think that a lot of things has changed. Look at the new expositions, for example, in the Jewish museums. The Jewish museums in the Dauerausstellung, in the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt, the Dauerausstellung in the Jewish Museum, they give you a new picture of German Jewry, and both of the Dauerausstellung that have been renewed in the last 2 or 3 years, and have been reopened, and both of them don't stop with the Shoah. The German Jewish history does not stop with the Shoah. Now in the Dauerausstellung you have the post-Soviet Jewish migration as a new step into the future, and German Jewish history in all of these Jewish museums continues into the 21st century. So it's not over. So the public memory has changed, I think, considerably. And okay, one may discuss this, but there I think Czolek with his Gedächtnistheater and Bodemann, they are almost outdated, even by those rather classical institutions like museums.
And finally?
No, I mean, it was more or less answered. I'm a bit more skeptical about the change of memory culture in Germany. And also, I mean, Max Czolek challenges not only like this Shoah memory culture, but I mean, he also refers to racism in Germany and challenges this racism, and we have it throughout the 2000s, 2010s until today. And I was wondering how this debate and this challenge really was picked up also in the broader debate in Germany. So I'm a bit more skeptical about how positive these changes are and forward-looking, and I mean, what Max Czolek does is really quite a fundamental challenge to German society also.
Yes, but I totally agree. But Max has two sides. He has this, backward looking to the memory culture that he thinks is is old-fashioned and should be done away with. And he has this other perspective to the future, where he says, "Oh, we must fight racism wherever we can find it. We must confront the rise of a political party, the AfD, in German parliaments everywhere, and 10% of the population vote right wing." And a racist, an openly racist party. So the Jews of Germany, however they are integrated or not in German society, the Jews of Germany are confronted with massive Muslim migration, but also massive racist refusal of Muslim migration. And these are the political facts, and there it is clear. Belkin and Scholek alike vote in favor of a Muslim-Jewish alliances that attack this anti-Muslim racism.
All right, so that was a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation and discussion. So thank you very much for sharing your work with us, and thank you to Daniel for leading off the discussion.